The digital clock read 7:02 a.m. when Vicente Albuquerque crossed the marble lobby of his own company, as imposing as ever. The sound of his shoes echoed among the hurried steps of employees avoiding his gaze. Nothing was out of place in his methodical routine, until a nervous receptionist cut him off. "Mr. Vicente, there's a little girl asking to speak with you." He frowned, impatient. In the middle of the lobby, a little girl with braids and a faded backpack watched him, holding something tightly in her hands. "Are you Mr. Vicente Albuquerque?" she asked, her voice trembling. The receptionist tried to intervene, but the girl held up a letter. "My mother told me to give this to you." The magnate took a deep breath, both intrigued and irritated. He reluctantly took the envelope. The handwritten name, Elena Duarte, hit him like a punch. Vicente's heart skipped a beat, but he quickly regained his usual composure. "Tell your mother I don't usually handle personal matters here," he replied curtly. The girl lowered her head, but didn't leave. "She said you would understand once you read it," insisted Julia, staring at him with an innocent yet determined look. Vicente turned his back, trying to shield himself from that feeling he had long avoided, the past knocking at his door. But curiosity got the better of him, and he slipped the letter into his suit jacket pocket. Hours later, in his top-floor office, Vicente opened the envelope with steady hands, even though his heart was trembling. The first few lines made him lean back in his chair. Elena, his great youthful love, stated she was dying. And more, she claimed that Julia was his daughter. For a few seconds, the silence in the room became unbearable. Vicente laughed, a humorless laugh, almost like self-protection. "This had to be some attempt of manipulation," he murmured, feeling the old wound reopen. He pressed a button and called for Fernanda, his assistant. Fernanda entered smiling, elegant, but her gaze quickly caught the tension in the air. "Is everything all right, Vicente?" she asked. He just shook his head, putting the letter in the drawer. "Nothing you need to worry about." But something in his tone suggested otherwise. Meanwhile, outside, Julia waited for a taxi in the light drizzle. She clutched a note her mother had written. "Trust him, my little one, even if he doesn't want to." The rain grew heavier, and the girl's tears mixed with it, as destiny began to take shape. Vicente watched the traffic below from his window, restless. The memory of Elena, her smile, her voice, haunted him. He wanted to believe it was all a lie, but the handwriting, the sweetness of the words, called him back to a time he had tried to forget.
That night, for the first time in years, Vincent couldn't sleep. The letter lay on his desk, bathed in the yellow glow of the lamp. Every word seemed to pulse. "She needs to know who you are before I'm gone." And without even realizing it, his mind was made up. He would uncover the truth. What if a simple letter could change the course of an entire life? If this story has already touched your heart, subscribe to the channel now and turn on notifications, because here, every story makes you feel, reflect, and live intensely. The next day, Vincent arrived at the office early, his expression dark. The city was still waking up, but his mind was already clouded with doubt. He summoned his trusted lawyer, Robert, and received him in silence. "I need a discreet investigation," he said, handing over Elena Duarte's name. Robert stared at him, confused. "What exactly do you want me to find out?" Vincent replied coldly, "Everything." Meanwhile, Helena woke up in her hospital bed, pale but serene. Julia was by her side, holding her mother's hand. "He was angry, Mama, but I think he'll read it." Helena smiled weakly, her eyes glistening. "He'll understand, my love. Sometimes people need to get very lost before they can find themselves. Back at the company, Fernanda could tell something was bothering him. She tried to get closer, offering coffee and practice smiles. Vincent kept his distance. It's personal. Fernanda's expression hardened. She knew he never spoke to her that way. One name echoed in her mind: Helena. During lunch, Vincent opened his laptop and typed her name into a search engine. Old pictures, event records, and a recent news article. Helena Duarte battles rare illness. Campaign seeks donations. He took a deep breath, feeling a knot form in his throat. The time that had passed suddenly felt cruel. That afternoon, while reviewing reports, the words from the letter echoed in his mind. Julia deserves to know her father. I'm not asking for anything else, just that. For the first time, Vincent couldn't focus on numbers, targets, or profits. The past was calling him back, and he knew he couldn't ignore it any longer. That evening, the magnate drove to the address written in the letter. The neighborhood was modest, with old houses and narrow streets. He parked his car in front of the small home and looked through the window. Toys scattered about, clothes hanging on a line, and a feeling of real life, something he had lost. He didn't have the courage to knock. He returned to his car, rested his head on the steering wheel, and closed his eyes. He remembered the day he had left Helena, telling her he needed to build something greater. Now he realized nothing was greater than what he had left behind. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Helena was writing another letter, not to Vincent, but to Julia. If he ever shows up, look into his eyes. You'll see that he always loved you, even if it's too late. Tears stained the paper, but her smile was one of hope.
Back in the car, Vincent picked up his phone and called Robert. "I want the DNA test. Tomorrow." The decision was made, and deep down he knew the truth he was trying to avoid would be both his greatest pain and his only salvation. The dawn brought more than just light for Vincent. It brought restlessness. Robert's email arrived even before his coffee. Helena's records confirmed she truly lived modestly and was admitted to a public hospital. No immediate family, just the daughter, Julia, the report stated. Vincent stared at the document, but the words began to blur. That simplicity stood in cruel contrast to his own life of luxury. At the hospital, Helena was reading an old storybook to Julia. The girl smiled, even while noticing her mother's weakness. "He's going to come back, right?" she asked quietly. Helena smoothed her hair and replied tenderly, "Sometimes destiny takes its time, but it never forgets the way." Silent tears fell, unseen by her daughter. Vincent spent the day hiding behind meetings. He tried to convince himself the investigation was just a precaution, not genuine interest. But with every passing hour, the image of the little girl in the lobby returned to his mind, and with it, the guilt. Fernanda noticed his distraction and seized the opening. "Vincent, don't let this situation distract you. That woman could be taking advantage of you." He looked at her tired. "You don't know anything, Fernanda." She swallowed hard, feeling the distance between them for the first time. Leaving the room, she discreetly typed a message to a journalist she knew. A headline was already forming in her mind: "Magnate involved in alleged paternity fraud." That night, Vincent went to the lab Robert recommended and provided DNA samples. "Absolute confidentiality," he requested. The doctor nodded. The weight of waiting began in that moment. It was a weight that couldn't be bought, only endured. Back at his penthouse, he opened a drawer and took out an old photograph. Helena smiling on a beach in Ubatuba, her hair messy from the wind, her eyes full of life. Vincent ran his finger over the image, as if trying to touch the past. "What have I done to you?" he whispered, his voice hoarse. At the hospital, Helena was also looking at a photo, the two of them young and happy, before everything fell apart. Life had taken such different paths that it seemed impossible they would ever cross again. And yet, destiny was about to prove otherwise. Julia slept beside the bed, clinging to an old teddy bear. Helena watched her daughter and made a silent prayer. Let him find her, even if he can no longer find me. Faith was her last remaining strength. At that very moment, Vincent looked out his penthouse window. The city was sleeping, but his soul wasn't. For the first time, the most powerful man in the city felt small in the face of what truly mattered.
2 days later, Robert notified him, "The test results will be ready tomorrow." Vincent nodded, but his mind was already consumed by memories. Images from the past returned with cruel clarity. Helena laughing at a market, holding his hand on Sunday afternoons, dreaming of a simple life he had looked down on. He became determined to understand what had happened to her after their separation. He dug through old records and discovered Helena had opened a small tutoring school and lived modestly until her illness appeared. No requests for help, no attempts to contact him. Her silence now hurt more than any words could. Meanwhile, Fernanda, driven by insecurity, sought to confirm her suspicions. She gained access to Vincent's email and read the messages exchanged with his lawyer. DNA test, absolute confidentiality. Her heart raced. The fear of losing everything made her act without thinking. That evening, she intercepted the confirmation message from the lab and tried to delete it, but it was too late. Vincent arrived and caught her at the computer. "What are you doing?" he asked coldly. Fernanda tried to cover. "I was just reviewing the schedule." He cut her off. "You're crossing a line, Fernanda." His tone left no room for doubt. She had just overstepped a boundary. At the hospital, Helena's condition worsened. The nurses noted her constant fever and growing exhaustion. Julia tried to hide her fear by drawing colorful hearts on paper. "So you'll get better soon, Mama?" Helena smiled and tucked the drawing under her pillow as if it were a good luck charm. The test results arrived in the morning. Vincent opened them with trembling hands. The answer was there, undeniable, a match, 99.9% probability of paternity. The truth he feared was now real. For several minutes he sat in silence, feeling the ground vanish beneath him. His phone vibrated, a call from Fernanda. He ignored it. He put on his jacket and hurried out. His driver asked for the destination, and he replied without hesitation, St. Vincent's Hospital. When he arrived, he saw Julia sitting in the corridor playing with paper dolls. The girl recognized him and smiled timidly. "You came?" she asked. Vincent knelt before her, not knowing what to say. He simply nodded. Helena, seeing him enter the room, brought her hand to her chest. For a moment, time stood still. He approached without words, his gaze filled with regret. "You came," she whispered, and a faint smile appeared on her pale lips. Vincent took her hand and felt, even in the silence, that forgiveness was already beginning to bloom there. Vincent remained silent before Helena, unable to speak. The hospital room seemed suspended in time, the sound of machines keeping rhythm with her breathing. "So it's true," he murmured. Helena nodded with a weak smile. "I never meant to lie to you. I just wanted her to know who she was." He took a deep breath, trying to contain the emotion rising in his throat.
Helena watched them from the bed, her heart torn between joy and pain. This was all she had ever wanted, to see the two of them together, even if only for a little while. "You two look alike," she said with a tired smile. Vincent moved closer, adjusted her pillow, and replied, "You still say that? Even after everything?" "After everything, I still love you," she confessed. The silence that followed was heavy and sincere. Vincent held her hand gently, feeling time dissolve around them. That touch brought back simple afternoons, shared laughter, and interrupted plans. Julia, unaware of the adult weight in the conversation, played on the floor with her new teddy bear.
"Look, Mama, he talks," she said, squeezing the toy that emitted a soft voice. Helena laughed, and for a moment the room felt full of life, as if the illness had forgotten to exist. Meanwhile, Fernanda arrived at the company and discovered Vincent had canceled important commitments. "He's lost his mind," she muttered, furious. She tried calling again, but he didn't answer. Her frustration turned to obsession, and her fear of being forgotten transformed into hatred. At the hospital, the doctor called Vincent aside to talk. "Miss Helena doesn't have much time left. Maybe weeks, maybe days." Vincent felt the ground disappear beneath him. "What can I do?" he asked, distressed. "Just be with her, that's all," the doctor replied. Back in the room, Helena noticed Vincent's weary expression. "Please don't cry for me. I've made peace with my life. I just wanted you to make peace with love." He held her hand tightly, silently promising he wouldn't leave her alone. Julia, seeing her father's tears, approached and hugged his legs. "Don't cry, mister. Mama will be okay." The girl's innocence broke his heart in a way nothing ever had before. As the sun began to set, Helena fell asleep, and Vincent stayed there, watching mother and daughter sleep. He felt a strange serenity, as if this moment were a gift, not a goodbye. For the first time, he understood that loving means staying present, even when you can't stay forever. The following days brought a surface-level peace, but beneath it, shadows were moving. Vincent visited Helena and Julia every afternoon, and his presence became part of the hospital's routine. Fernanda, however, watched her influence slip through her fingers. At the office, the magnate's absence fueled rumors and questions. "Is he involved with an old flame?" employees whispered. Determined to regain control, Fernanda began to act. She hired a journalist to discreetly follow Vincent. Photos of him entering the hospital holding Helena's hand began circulating anonymously online. "Billionaire abandons business for unknown woman," the headline read. Vincent ignored his advisor's warnings. "Let them talk, I don't care." At the hospital, Helena tried to protect him. "You're going to ruin your reputation because of me," she said, worried. Vincent smiled sadly. "My reputation never made me happy, Helena." That sincerity touched her more deeply than any promise could have. "Then stay, but do it for her," she said, pointing to Julia, who was drawing hearts in her notebook.
Meanwhile, Fernanda was plotting her final move. She forged an email supposedly sent by Helena asking for money in exchange for silence about Julia's paternity. The email was leaked to the press. Within hours, the scandal exploded. TV news channels reported on the secret romance and million-dollar blackmail scheme. Vincent saw the messages and called Fernanda, his voice cold as ice. "Did you do this?" he asked. Her silence was answer enough. "You destroyed the only good thing I've gotten back in my life." He hung up without yelling, without crying, just with the certainty that he would never return to that old life. At the hospital, Helena saw the news and cried silently. "I swear I didn't do anything," she told him when he arrived. Vincent hugged her, and the emotion that united them was stronger than any lie. "I know. I believe you." But the pressure kept growing. Investors began pulling back, and the once stable company plunged into chaos. Vincent decided to step down from his position and submitted a resignation letter. "Nothing is more important than the time I still have left to live," he told the board, leaving everyone stunned. When Fernanda found out, she broke down. She cried alone in her office, realizing too late that what she called love was really just possession, and that her obsession had destroyed what little remained of herself. At the hospital, Julia showed Vincent a new drawing. "It's us again, but now Mama has wings." He looked at it, moved. "Why wings, sweetheart?" he asked. Julia replied, "Because angels have wings, right?" Vincent realized then that time was running out and that he needed to live every second as if it were the last. The next morning, Vincent arrived at the hospital with a simple gift, a heart-shaped balloon. Julia ran to him and hugged him, laughing. "You came early today." He knelt down to her level and replied, "Today, I came just for you." It was true. Business, appointments, the outside world, everything had been left behind. Helena watched them with tear-filled eyes. She never had a father, Vincent, and yet she always believed she did. He sat beside her, held her hand, and answered, "Now she does, and I'm not leaving anymore." The sincerity in his words made Helena smile, despite her obvious exhaustion. Vincent began taking part in Julia's daily life. He brought books, told stories, and even learned how to braid hair. The girl laughed, proud of her clumsy father. "You're funny, Dad," she said, and his heart swelled with emotion. It was the first time anyone had called him that. One afternoon, Helena asked him to take her to the hospital garden. "I want to feel the breeze again," she said. Vincent slowly wheeled her chair to the small, flower-filled courtyard. The sun turned her hair golden, and he felt as if time had stopped for a moment. "It feels like we're back in Ubatuba," she whispered.
"I remember that day," he replied, smiling. "You wore a blue dress and said the sea seemed to understand us." Helena laughed weakly. "And you promised you'd never leave." He lowered his head, regretful. "This time, I'll keep my promise." That evening, Julia insisted on sleeping in her mother's room. Helena agreed, and Vincent watched them both fall asleep. The scene etched itself in his mind like a living painting, a memory he knew he would carry forever. In the days that followed, he devoted himself entirely to them. He began ignoring phone calls, emails, and company problems. His priority had changed, being present. The man who once controlled empires was now learning to value a simple, "I love you, Dad." One afternoon, Julia handed him a paper flower. "It's for when Mama goes to live in heaven, so she won't forget us." Vincent felt tears burning his eyes. "She'll never forget, sweethood, never." As the sun set behind the buildings, Helena watched them and murmured, "Now I can go in peace." But Vincent knew deep inside the farewell was approaching, and nothing in the world could prepare him for it. Autumn arrived, bringing a gentle chill and the silent warning of an ending. Helena's condition worsened each day. The doctor had spoken frankly with Vincent. "She's no longer responding to medication. Prepare yourself." Vincent stood motionless, trying to contain his despair. "Isn't there anything more we can do?" he insisted. The doctor simply lowered his gaze. "Just be present." Helena seemed increasingly fragile, but still maintained the same sweet light in her eyes. "Are you looking at me with pity, Vincent?" she asked, smiling. "No," he replied, squeezing her hand. "I'm looking at the strongest woman I've ever known." The words made Helena laugh, and for a moment the weight of her illness seemed to disappear. Julia drew pictures beside the bed, humming quietly. She sensed something was wrong, but still believed in miracles. "Daddy said you're going to be okay, Mama." Helena kissed her forehead. "I will be okay, my love. I just need to rest a little more." Outside, Fernanda watched the hospital from her car, distressed. Since Vincent had stepped away from the company, everything was falling apart. The board ignored her, journalists were looking for her, and remorse began eating away at her soul. She knew she had gone too far, and for the first time she felt ashamed of what she had done. Vincent spent the night by Helena's bedside, holding her hand.
In silence, he remembered everything they could have lived together. "If only I had come back sooner," he murmured. Helena opened her eyes and replied in a faint voice, "You came back. That's what matters." The night was long. The sound of monitors was the only noise. Occasionally, Helena would wake up, asking him to tell stories about Julia. "She's going to be an amazing woman," she would say. Vincent smiled, even though his heart ached.
At dawn, Fernanda entered the hospital. She wanted to see him, to ask for forgiveness. But when she saw him holding Helena's hand and crying silently, she stepped back. She realized there was no place for her in that love, and maybe there never had been. As morning light filled the room, Helena opened her eyes for the last time. "Promise you'll take care of her?" she whispered. Vincent answered through tears, "With my life." Helena smiled faintly, and without pain, fell asleep forever. The monitor emitted a continuous sound. The world seemed to stop. Vincent rested his head against her cold hand and wept with the pain of someone who has lost the love of their life and the chance to make up for lost time. From that moment on, he was no longer a businessman. He was just a grieving father, a heart trying to survive. The funeral took place in a small cemetery under a light rain. Vincent stood firm, holding Julia close. Helena's coffin was slowly lowered, covered with white flowers. Julia watched, confused. "Is she going to wake up later, Daddy?" she asked innocently. Vincent held her tighter. "She's going to wake up in another place, sweetheart. A beautiful place." The press tried to capture images, but Vincent ignored the camera flashes. Nothing else mattered. The man who once controlled markets now just wanted to disappear. After the burial, he stayed there alone, watching the rain fall on the simple headstone. "Forgive me, Helena, for everything." In the days that followed, the company plunged into chaos. Vincent's resignation had caused panic among investors. Fernanda was removed from her position and faced investigations over the leaks. Alone, she looked in the mirror and saw a defeated woman, not because of him, but because of her own mistakes. Meanwhile, Vincent isolated himself with Julia in his mansion. The sensitive girl tried to fill the silence with questions. "Mama can see us, right?" she would say. "Yes, she can," he would answer, forcing a smile. At night, memories of Helena came in waves. The sound of her laughter, the gentle touch of her hands, the smell of coffee from the simple mornings they had shared. A week later, Vincent received a box delivered by a nurse. Inside was an envelope addressed to him. "Read when the longing hurts too much." With trembling hands, he opened it. It was a letter from Helena, written before she died. "I know you'll blame yourself, but you don't need to. Life did what it had to do. Take care of our little girl. Teach her to be kind. And don't be afraid to feel. Love doesn't end, Vincent. It just moves somewhere else." The words broke him. He cried silently while Julia slept. For the first time, he felt that Helena was still there, in the memories, in their daughter's mannerisms, in everything that was simple and true.
The next day, he took Julia to a park. They sat under a tree, watching the sunset. "Mama liked the sky, didn't she?" the girl asked. Vincent smiled. "She used to say every star was a happy memory." Julia looked up at the sky and replied, Then we're going to have lots of stars. As the wind rustled the leaves, Vincent understood what Helena meant. Their love hadn't died. It had just changed form. Now it lived there, in the starlight, and in the smile of a child who carried the best of both of them. The days following Helena's funeral were quiet. Vincent's house, once full of voices and movement, now felt like a sanctuary of memories. Julia stayed in the guest room, and every morning she would run to her father's study with drawings in her hands. "Look, Daddy, I drew us smiling!" Vincent would smile back, trying to hide the weariness in his soul. "It's beautiful, sweetheart." That night, after putting her to bed, he returned to his study. On the desk were Helena's photos, the letters, and the teddy bear he had given his daughter. He sat down and stared into the emptiness. Each memory was both a wound and a comfort. "You made me feel alive again, even as you were leaving," he whispered to the portrait. The nurses who had cared for Helena organized a small tribute at the hospital. They sent flowers and a note to Vincent. "She passed peacefully, speaking of you and Julia." The next day, he placed the flowers on her grave under the same gray sky as the burial. Julia went with him, holding his hand tightly. "Daddy, can she hear me?" she asked, looking at the flower-covered ground. Vincent took a deep breath. "Yes, and she's very proud of you." The girl smiled, and for the first time he felt love beginning to heal the pain. The media, however, gave him no peace. Headlines kept appearing. Tycoon disappears after scandal. Vicente Albuquerque's fortune may collapse. He didn't care anymore. Money, once a symbol of power, was now just a reminder of everything that had kept him from what truly mattered. Fernanda tried to reach out again, sending messages of regret. "I never meant to hurt you," she wrote. Vincent read them, but didn't respond. His silence was his answer. He knew forgiveness didn't need to be spoken, just lived in peace. That evening, while putting Julia to bed, she asked, "You'll always stay with me, Daddy?" Vincent kissed her forehead and replied, "Always. That's the one promise I'll never break again." After she fell asleep, he looked out the mansion window. The city glittered, indifferent to what he felt. But high above, one star seemed brighter than the others. He smiled. "Good night, Helena." Deep down, he knew the grief would never completely disappear, but he also knew her love had transformed him into someone capable of loving again.
Weeks went by, and Vincent had to face the consequences of what he'd left behind. The company, now under new management, notified him of his permanent departure. He didn't protest. "I already gave that place everything I had," was all he said. The empire he'd built was beginning to crumble, but he no longer saw this as a loss, rather as a liberation. On Sunday, Vincent took Julia back to the cemetery. He brought fresh flowers and the teddy bear she wanted to leave for her mother. "She'll like it," the girl said, placing the toy at the foot of the headstone. Vincent knelt beside her and closed his eyes. "You're still the reason for everything I am." When they returned home, he found a pile of unopened letters, condolences, business proposals, threats. He threw them all away, keeping only Helena's letter and a notebook. He decided it was time to write his own story. That night, Julia asked him to tell a bedtime story.
Vincent made one up about a man who lost everything but found love in a little girl's smile. "What happened to him?" Julia asked sleepily. Vincent replied, "He discovered that love is the only treasure no one can steal." In the following days, he began donating parts of his fortune to hospitals and shelters. The press was surprised. Former billionaire gives away half his wealth to social causes. But to him, it was simple. He was paying a debt to life. Fernanda was seen leaving the country. One final message arrived in his email. "I hope you find the peace I never knew how to give you." Vincent read it, and for the first time felt compassion for her. He saved the message as a reminder that everyone, in their own way, tries to love, even if they go about it the wrong way. On a cold morning, he and Julia walked hand in hand through a park. "You know, Daddy," she said, "Mama is happy now. I dreamed about her, and she was smiling at us." Vincent smiled, holding back tears. "Then that's what matters, my love. She smiles because we're okay." Back home, he hung up the drawing Julia had made months earlier, the three of them holding hands with a huge sun above them. He looked at the picture and felt peace. For the first time, pain and love existed side by side, living in harmony. As he turned off the lights, he looked at the starry sky through the window. "I promised I'd take care of her, Helena, and I will." Outside, the wind blew gently, like a silent answer, and Vincent knew she had heard him. Months had passed since Helena's death. Vincent's life had completely changed. The luxurious mansion now felt too big for just two hearts seeking peace. One morning he woke up and made a simple yet definitive decision. He would sell everything and start over with Julia, far from the city that reminded him so much of the past. With the money from the sale, he bought a small house in a country town, surrounded by trees and silence. Julia was delighted. "There are real birds here, Daddy." Vincent laughed with a lightness he hadn't felt in a long time. "And there's space to plant flowers, just like Mama liked."
Life there was simple. Vincent learned how to make drip coffee, fix the fence, and take Julia to school. Mornings were no longer filled with meetings and reports. They were now made of laughter, drawings, and the sound of wind against the windows. Over time, he began drafting a project inspired by Helena, an institute to support single mothers offering both medical and emotional support. He called it Helena's House. When he showed the plans to Julia, she smiled. "Mama would love this." The small town embraced the idea. Volunteers came together, and within months, the place was ready. A simple space, but filled with love. Vincent gave a speech at the opening. "This house is for all the women who, like Helena, chose love over hardship." People applauded, and he felt that, in some way, she was there. Fernanda, in a distant country, read the news online. She cried when she saw the photo of Vincent and Julia together, smiling. "Now he's happy," she murmured. For the first time, she felt genuine relief, as if she could finally let him go. Their afternoons were dedicated to stories. Vincent and Julia would sit on the porch, reading books that Helena had loved. Sometimes, when the wind blew strongly, Julia would say, "That's her stopping by to say hello." He believed it. One night, Julia asked, "Daddy, are we going to live here forever?" Vincent looked at the starry sky and replied, "For as long as our hearts want to, yes." And in that moment, the man who once measured life in profits learned to measure it in moments. Time began to heal. The love Helena had left in every memory was now blooming there, between the sound of cicadas and a child's laughter, the true sound of redemption. 2 years passed.
Julia grew, and Vincent was no longer the same man. His hair now had some gray, but his eyes had regained their spark. Helena's house was thriving, helping dozens of women. He wasn't seeking recognition. Seeing the smiles of people who found hope there was enough. One morning, while organizing papers, Julia entered his office holding a notebook. "Daddy, can I show you something?" It was a diary. "I wrote like you do," she said proudly. Vincent flipped through the pages and read simple, heartfelt sentences. "My dad is the kindest man in the world. He makes bad coffee, but he makes me laugh every day." Vincent laughed heartily, his spirit feeling light. "This diary will be worth more than all the books in the world." Julia hugged him and added, "Because it's about love, right?" He nodded. "Exactly." On Saturday afternoons, the two would visit the field where Helena was buried. They brought fresh flowers, and Julia would tell stories from school as if her mother were still there. "She hears everything, Daddy. I know." He believed it, because in a way, she really did.
One evening, he found Helena's old diary, stored away among some boxes. He read passages he had never seen before. "If he ever comes back, I want him to know I still believe in him. True love never dies, it just moves to a different home." Vincent closed the notebook with trembling hands. "It moved into me," he whispered. With each day, he became more present. He helped Julia with her homework, baked disastrous pies, and laughed at himself. The house, once silent, was now a home full of life. The emptiness left by Helena's absence had transformed into gratitude. On the eve of Julia's birthday, he prepared a surprise. He hung photos of Helena and wrote on the living room wall, "Mama's love lives on in us." When Julia saw it, she cried and hugged him. "Now there are 3 of us again, right, Daddy?" Vincent replied with tears in his eyes, "We always were, sweetheart." That night, they looked at the stars together. Julia pointed to one that shone brighter than the others. "That's her." Vincent smiled. "Yes, and she's laughing at us." Their laughter echoed across the porch, as light as the wind. Vincent finally understood the meaning of it all. Love that seems lost to time doesn't disappear. It transforms into light, guiding those who remain. And under that peaceful sky, father and daughter continued laughing, certain that Helena would never cease to exist as long as there was love between them. It was a sunny morning, the kind when the wind blows gently and seems to carry memories. Julia, now 10 years old, was helping her father organize old books. Between the yellowed pages of one of Helena's notebooks, something fell to the floor. A faded, sealed envelope addressed to "My little Julia, for when you're ready." Julia looked at Vincent, her eyes shining. "Can I open it, Daddy?" He nodded with an emotional smile. "Of course, sweetheart. I think she was waiting for this moment." Julia opened it carefully, and inside was a page written in Helena's delicate handwriting. "My daughter, if you're reading this, it means you've grown up a little. I want you to know that I've loved you from the first second, and the love I feel for you is the same love that made me believe in your father. Maybe life hasn't been fair, but it gave us enough time to love, and that's enough." Tears streamed down Vincent's face. Julia continued reading, her voice trembling but steady. "Your father will teach you what courage is, even if he sometimes cries when no one's looking. And when he looks at you, he'll see a little piece of me. Take care of him, okay? He's strong, but his heart is made of glass." Vincent covered his face with his hands, overcome with emotion. Julia hugged him tightly. "She was right, Daddy. You do cry when no one's looking." He laughed through his tears, "And you discovered my secret." At the end of the letter, there was one final sentence, simple and eternal. "When you miss me, look at the sky. I'll always be up there smiling down at you." Julia stood up and ran into the backyard. The sun was high, and the wind blew softly through the trees. She held the letter up to the sky and shouted, "We love you, Mama!" Vincent approached and, unable to hold back his tears, looked upward. Always. That night they framed the letter and hung it in the living room next to their family photos. It was the last physical piece of Helena, but her love lived on in everything. In the garden flowers, in the sound of Julia's laughter, in Vincent's renewed spirit. Before bedtime, Julia asked, "Daddy, do you think time fixes everything?" He thought for a moment and replied, "Time doesn't fix things, sweetheart. It teaches us to love what remains." She smiled, satisfied with the answer, and fell asleep. Vincent stayed there, watching her sleep. The wind came through the window, making the curtain sway gently. The same wind Helena used to call God's way of hugging us without touching. He smiled, feeling light-hearted for the first time in years. As he turned off the light, he whispered into the darkness, "You won, Helena. Love won." Outside, a star shone brighter than the others, and Vincent knew she had heard. Some loves never die. They just change form. If this story moved you, leave a like, subscribe to the channel now, and share it with someone who believes that true love always finds a way. Because here, every story is a reminder that feeling is still worth it.